How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Set 6, and today we're going to be talking about Crisis Core Reunion and, what to expect, what we're going to get from the game. Don't forget, drop a like on the video, subscribe for future content so that you don't miss any of the Final Fantasy news that's going to be coming out in the next few months, because, we've got a big year ahead of us, so make sure you hit that sub button. But let's get on with it. So Crisis Core Reunion is a remake slash remaster plus. A remaster plus, I think that might be the best shout for it, It's a remaster plus of the original Crisis Core game from the PSP. Now obviously there's going to be a lot of improvements to the game, and we're going to look over what those improvements could be and what other stuff we could find. And the first thing we need to talk about is one of the things that turned a lot of people off from Crisis Core in the, back in the day, if I'm being completely honest, and that was the combat. Now, the combat in the original game, well, it was different. It was a departure from what we were used to with Final Fantasy at that time, but it was still close enough. It was still reasonable and close enough. However, there were a lot of things about the combat that made every encounter slow down and grind to a halt, and that was the DMW. Now, the DMW is one of the main mechanics and gimmicks that kind of goes on during combat in Crisis Core, and it's still going to be a part of Crisis Core Reunion. And what the DMW does, it spins 3 slots basically, and once you get those 3 slots to match, you get stuff, be that an attack, be that a level up on a skill or a materia or you sell, you get stuff. But in the original game, that used to pop up and kind of take over the combat for about 5 seconds, and then you'd get the attack that you'd get, which would be an unskippable scene that would take between 5 and 10 seconds, and yeah, it'd go off quite a bit in certain situations, and you'd find yourself just sat there not really playing, or at least having combat encounters just stopped and dragged out. But in Crisis Core Reunion, that seems to have been eradicated. So now the DMW, it'll still do the same thing, but it'll do it in the background. So you'll see the DMW spin, but when you actually hit something, rather than taking over the full screen, it'll just kind of stay in the top left-hand corner where it is. The cutscenes that used to play don't really pop up from what I can see, and if they do, they're skippable. And on top of that, the attack that you get, if you do get an attack from it, you can store and use at an opportunity that's more convenient to you. These 3 or 4 changes alone are going to dramatically improve the combat of Crisis Core Reunion. Like, it's going to be a big improvement, I'm being completely honest. One of the most frustrating things about my recent playthrough of Crisis Core was the DMW. Very annoying. And from what I can see in Crisis Core Reunion, that's no longer an issue. So yeah, a lot of people who had problems with the combat of Crisis Core Reunion could see that those issues have been rectified. It does seem like people keep saying it's more in line with Remake's combat system. I don't think it is. I think it's just a better version of Crisis Core's combat system. It doesn't seem massively different from everything else that I've seen. It's the DMW, and that was the problem, and the fact that they've acknowledged that and rectified it and made it less intrusive is a good thing. On top of that, you've got other little additions to the combat, such as the ability gauge stagger, so when an enemy is using the big attack, when they're whipping out the big guns, a bar will show up, and if you can deplete that bar before they use the attack, it staggers them and interrupts the attack. Nice little touch. Now, another thing that I've noticed as well is this Buster Sword proficiency. It's popped up on, I don't know if it was on the previous trailers, but I've just noticed it on the one that dropped a few days ago. The More Than a Remaster trailer, which, very subtle, Square, very subtle, and we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, the Buster Sword proficiency. I don't recall that ever being a thing. It could potentially be that the Buster Sword gets stronger the more proficient Zack becomes with it, or some additional functionality gets unlocked. Let me know what you think about that. Buster Sword proficiency. I don't remember that from Crisis Core. Was that there? I don't think it was there. Let me know. But yeah, that's the combat. It seems like it's been improved quite a bit, so I'm looking forwards to that. Next, we're going to move on to the visuals and the performance, and we did get a quite convenient post that was dropped the other day, which goes over each of the platforms that the game's coming out on, the display resolution, and the frame rate. And as you can see, on most things, we're looking at 1080p, which, perfectly fine. On certain consoles like the PS4 Pro, like the PlayStation 5, like the Xbox Series X and the Xbox One X, we're looking at 4K, and I assume that would be achievable on PC as well, depending on your PC, because it does say at the bottom there for Steam, display dependent. And then next to the resolution, you can see the frame rate it's going to be running at. So on your next gen consoles, we're looking at 60 FPS at 4K. On the Pros from the previous gen, you're still getting 4K, but only 30 FPS. I'm pretty sure on Steam, it'll be, again, if your PC is good enough, you can get 4K 60 FPS or maybe even higher. It does say that it will go up to 120, so, you do you. And then you've got the Switch chilling on 720p. Yeah, cool. Unlucky. But in general, the visuals of Crisis Core Reunion look a pretty substantial step up from the original game. Like I say, there was this trailer that dropped the other day, which is the More Than a Remaster trailer. I've had that playing in the background. If I've not, I'll put it on now, just so that you can see some of the comparison shots where it shows exactly what this scene looked like in the original game and what it looks like now. And yeah, massive jump. So really looking forward to this. Really looking forward to getting hold of it on PS5 and seeing what it looks like on my big shiny TV. That's going to be good. It's going to be an experience playing Crisis Core like that. Because, yeah, PSP wasn't it. And then the final thing we're going to look at is what's going to happen with the narrative. Now, the narrative is the narrative. I reckon it stays 99.9% faithful to the original game's narrative. So if you've played Crisis Core, you know what's going to happen. If you've not played Crisis Core, enjoy. But yeah, if you've played Crisis Core, nothing dramatic's going to change. I think there's a couple of things that they could put into Crisis Core Reunion, and we'll quickly touch on them now. I might do another video that just speculates on the story. I've kind of touched on it before in other videos as well, so maybe, we'll see. Check out the previous video that I've done on Crisis Core Reunion. That might have the answers in. But as far as things that they could do story-wise, I mean, there's not much. The first thing that they could do change-wise would be to hint towards the Final Fantasy VII Remake ending. See how they do that. I think if they do it as a post-credit scene way after the actual ending. They'll probably show the original ending to Crisis Core in Reunion. And that's what I think, at least. Like, what's the point in the game if you're not going to show the actual ending? I suppose if you start seeing big changes throughout the game, maybe not. If we see massive deviations from the story of Crisis Core in Crisis Core Reunion, then maybe things do change. Maybe we do get the remake version of the ending. But personally, I don't think that's going to be the case. What I think is most likely is, like I say, we get a post-credit scene that maybe shows the remake ending, maybe even gives us a little bit extra that we've not seen in remake or intermissions endings, because, they like doing that. But on top of that, I feel like they could add some context, potentially, as to what's going on in remake. So I'll fly over this quickly. The general vibe that I've got and that a lot of other people have got is that Sephiroth has somehow come back in time or gone to some alternate reality or something. I think it's most likely he's just come back in time or sent his consciousness back in time to try and alter events. But you could argue then that by doing that he creates an alternate reality. It's a whole deep thing, we're not going to get into it. But we don't know when Sephiroth came back. There's a lot of speculation that when we see Aerith at the start of Final Fantasy VII Remake, you see that purple glow down at the far end of the alleyway that she's in, and people think that right there is Sephiroth coming back. And that's possible. That's very possible. But it's also possible that he's already back, and that is just Sephiroth's presence that Aerith's detecting. What if the thing that he comes back to is prior to Final Fantasy VII? What if it's something that happens in Crisis Core? Now, spoilers, if you've not played Crisis Core or the original FF7, be prepared. I'll give you a second. I'm going to spoil things now. Ready? Okay. So in the original Crisis Core, as we know, Sephiroth gets yeeted into the Mako reactor, goes into the live stream, shit goes down. And one theory that I've kind of been, it's not even a theory really, but one thought that's been kicking around in my head is, what if at that moment when Sephiroth falls into the live stream and kind of becomes one with it to an extent, what if that creates something like a marker, like a bookmark, and Sephiroth somehow finds a way to access that bookmark and send his consciousness to it? If that's the case, we could potentially see a hint of Sephiroth's return in Crisis Core Reunion. I don't think it's a very likely possibility, but I think it is a possibility that they give us something that hints towards how Sephiroth's done this. There are a lot of other questions as well, though, that we need answers to, so it may be something that's not Sephiroth related. But this is a story about Zack, Sephiroth and Cloud. This is the genesis, of that story. So it makes sense that if the point that Sephiroth comes back to is within the timeline of Crisis Core, that we may see a suggestion of it. I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities. How they do that? Do they just slip a cutscene in? Do they also do it as a post-credit scene, maybe? Do they do it in missions? Because in Crisis Core, there's a massive amount of missions that you go through. I believe there's 10 sections with at least 3 missions in each section. What if they just add a section of missions that kind of point to Sephiroth and hints of Sephiroth? They don't even give it to us explicitly. They just do these missions. Zack notices something weird is going on. Zack doesn't know anything about it. but us as the observer looking in, we go, oh, Sephiroth. It's possible. I think it's more likely it's a straight shot remake. That's it. Just a straight shot, this is Crisis Core Reunion, enjoy. I think that is the most likely, but you can't rule out the possibility that they mess around and change stuff. Especially after remake. You can't rule it out. So, yeah. Let me know what you think anyway. What do you think? Do you think that Crisis Core Reunion is going to change? Are you excited for Crisis Core Reunion? Are you day one in Crisis Core Reunion, or are you going to give it a little bit and pick it up then? What platform are you getting Crisis Core Reunion on? Let me know what's going on with you. Let me know your situation as far as Crisis Core Reunion goes. The hype is slowly starting to build. It really is, because I'm up for it. I want to know if there's any little morsels, like I was just saying. I want to know, are we going to get any explanations? But that's going to be enough from me today. Don't forget, drop a like on the video. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments below. And subscribe for future content, because we've got a lot more Final Fantasy stuff coming over the course of the next year. It's going to be a big year. We've got Reunion, we've got Ever Crisis, maybe. We've got Final Fantasy 16, we've got Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. On top of that, we've got Forspoken as well, if we go outside the Final Fantasy franchise. So yeah, big year ahead for Square Enix and fans of Square Enix games. So make sure you hit that sub button. But more importantly than anything, have a great day.